NZ Aerosports, Icarus Canopies, now Gyro. That's right, we've rebranded, and Gyro is our next generation. It honours our founder, as that's the name we knew him by, but Gyro also marks the start of a new chapter. And not to be biased, but it's going to be fucking epic. Long story short, we're more us than ever, so if you're new to the sport, or even a Sky God Ninja Turtle, welcome. I think our valiant leader Lucy, Gyro's daughter, says it best.
And we still got that fuck yeah attitude. Rebrand! Woo!
Rebrand woo indeed, Lucy. Anyway, head over to gyro.com for more info and get amongst you legends.
I was 19, broke, unemployed, and sold my girlfriend's canopy for drug money. So I thought I better sew her a new one. What a sentence, and what a story. This describes the humble yet outrageous beginnings of NZ Aerosports, the home of Icarus Canopies, in the words of our founder himself. From getting a paratrooper toy from his mom, watching parachutes at the DZ as a 6-year-old, jumping off the wharf with a parachute made from bed sheets, doing his first jump at 16, sewing his first canopy on a borrowed machine at 19, and starting to sell parachutes out of a garage in 1986, Paul Gyro Martin had an undying love for the sky. Our company started with one man with the wildest of spirits and a true blue sky dream, a renegade. In the time that Gyro created and ran the Icarus Canopies brand until he passed away in 2017, he pushed everything he had to its limits. We miss him, and we always will. Gyro is the next generation of NZ Aerosports. It honors our founder, of course, because it was the name we all knew him by, but Gyro the rebrand also marks the start of a new chapter, our next jump. Gyro is the space between sound and silence, art and science, chaos and calm. Gyro is a state of epic tranquility that transcends understanding. That moment, in the door, in free fall, mid-swoop, where nothing but the present exists. A perfect balance of euphoria and thrill. Gyro captures our passion for flying and our commitment to designing break-the-fucking-rules canopies that deliver pilots pure, wild flight. Hey gang, so I got a new book out. It's called The Upside of Fear, and it's exactly what you think it's about. It's about the good side of, well, getting scared. In it, we talk not only about the science and biology behind fear, but the psychology as well. And it's not just coming from me, it's coming from some of the best in the sport. Omar Alhigelan, Jeff Provenzano, Maxine Tate, and so many more have contributed their sometimes terrifying stories to the book to help you overcome your fear. So head to the lunaticfringepodcast.com. You're going to find the link to the book there, as well as the other books. It's available in ebook, paperback, hardback, and audiobook right now.
Coming straight from the cockpit, it's another episode of Lunatic Fringe with the fucking pilot.
Ready, set, go! Back in the can for another edition of the Lunatic Fringe podcast, and a couple of smiling faces from the UK on to tell me a few stories. Let's get going. Who the fuck are you guys, and what do you do?
All right, so my name is Paul Dorward, and I've been skydiving for, close to 30 years, maybe.
Oof.
Maybe a bit less. I don't really want to sound that old, to be honest, but yeah, I've been kind of like skydiving around the UK, a little bit around the world. I work for Flight One now as a Flight One instructor, and I also work inside the wire at Flight One as the sport director. So I get to kind of like steer the ship a little bit as well. What else do I do? Okay, so I'm also a chief instructor at a drop zone in the UK as well, as a bit of a side gig. Jumps wise, done close to 12,000, kind of like hovering around the high 11s for a couple of years. Obviously, I do a lot of canopy piloting. That's kind of like the main focus right now. But I mean, this stuff goes back for years. Like I was a massive four-way nut for years. Never quite found the team that worked. I had some good times. I had some good times on some good teams. But yeah, like you always think you're going to do better than you do, and yeah,
Sure. So it sounds to me like
still chasing the dream a little bit.
you wear quite a few hats in the sport.
I got a few things going on, yeah. For real.
Yeah, that's not bad.
But it's a kind of it's a crazy sport, as we all know, but it's one that just keeps opening up doors, for opportunity and things, and just I embrace that stuff. Love it a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, Ollie.
Yeah, so what an intro to have to follow. So I started skydiving about the same kind of time as Paul. I've had a much slower burning trajectory. I did my first jump at university. I was talked into it when I was drunk to do like a parachute jump, and I thought it seemed like a good idea at the time. I was a terrible first jump student, did an appalling exit. For some reason, and I guess this was the critical junction, I went back to do a second. I'm not really quite sure why that was, but a second became a third, became a fourth, became a fifth, and I just kind of carried on. And that was like 25 years ago now. And just through that time, had an incredible time in the sport, worked my way through the system. I'm primarily an AFF instructor. I love teaching. I get a lot out of it. I kind of present as a normal day job guy who kind of does normal things on the surface, but I've got a kind of real addiction to adventure sports, and a lot of that kind of helps keep me sane through my day-to-day life. But above all, skydiving has been a fantastic influence in my life. It's given me so much, and I love every moment of it.
Well, we all kind of started out at roughly the same time, because I'm hovering around that 29-year mark as well. So we're all kind of old fuckers in the sport now. Like we're not.
I mean, Ollie definitely is.
We're not the spring chickens anymore. I mean, and I don't know about you guys, but I still feel like a kid in this sport until I meet the real kids in this sport, and I go, "Oh shit, okay."
I mean, it kind of dawned on me.
What surprises me the most is like how you go through waves in the sport, right? So like when you first start it, it's just the best thing in the world. You'll sell your shoes to go and make a skydive, right? It's literally that level, right? It's food or jumping, right? And then you get a bit closer to like working in the sport. Maybe you become like over in the UK, you can become like a basic instructor or a camera guy with relatively few jumps. You can kind of get more involved in certain aspects of working in the sport, and then you kind of level out at that point, and you kind of just cruise in, and then you can kind of feel like you either go down the trough, which is like kind of losing interest, bit same old every week, or you then spike up again and go, tandems, I'll do tandems, that looks like fun. or you get told tandems are fun. Like kids out there don't believe that shit, right? I'm joking, of course, but then you peak out on a tandem gig, and then maybe you get your AFF rating, peak out on AFF, but what I've noticed is like, although there's all these peaks and troughs, like every time you're in a trough, it's like I always know that there's another thing coming across the horizon, And my greatest quote is like, I do a lot of canopy stuff, obviously, but I learned to free fly about, I don't know, 5 or 6 years ago, just before the kind of lockdowns. And that's always amazing to people, when you kind of do your intro on the Flight 1 courses. Like, I'm a novice free flyer. I mean, I can hold my own. I'm all right. I had a really great coach, and I have to tip my hat to Jed Parker. He was like the tunnel manager over in the UK, and he kind of took me under his wing and showed me how to free fly properly, not just like fast track through, like most people do. But I really embraced that, like learning space,
Sure.
And that's what I love about it. Like when you become a novice again, it's like it's super important. It's like you can totally learn from, being in that learning space or out of your comfort zone. Totally out of my comfort zone.
Yeah,
there's on my belly, and then I'm upside down. Like, what the hell's going on?
Oh, there's a real joy to finding out that you suck in something that you've been doing for so long, and that you've got more to learn, right?
I think it's one of the things
and that's a great segue for Ollie, because he's talking to everything.
Go on, Ollie.
No, I think it's one of the things that outsiders of the sport struggle to understand the most, just how many different disciplines there are within skydiving. And, like Paul, I've really only scratched the surface on a few of them. I mean, Paul, I will vouch for what Paul said. He is a pretty hopeless free flyer. I've seen that on many jumps. But we won't go there. It's not about embarrassing Paul. But I've never really done any crew. I've done like 2 wingsuit jumps in my whole life. I can't fly on my head. There's all these different things that if I had a bit more time, I know these will come. But there's just so many disciplines. You can't be good at them all. And I think that's kind of one of the things that kind of keeps me coming back for more, that there's just always more to learn. And the field is growing as well. There's new disciplines arriving all the time. So that definitely holds a lot of appeal for me.
Well, and then there's the one core thing that ties it all together, which is the community, which no matter whether you're burned out on jumping or not, that's always there. Like even when I took my breaks from jumping for a couple of years at a time and just spent my time up in the cockpit, I was still absolutely a skydiver, even though I wasn't actively jumping because of the community.
Yeah, it's funny as well that you know as you peak and trough in the sport, and you kind of like you say, burnout's a really good turn of phrase actually. So as you burn out in one aspect, I never really kind of like took myself away from the drop zones and go, right, burnt out, scrap that, going to take up golf or something else, as much as, Ollie would have preferred it, I'm sure. But, always being around the sport is where I think the opportunities come from to then take on different tracks or different avenues, and I think that's maybe more on a personal level to want to stay engaged, because I used to be a drop zone manager as well many years ago, and I managed a drop zone in the UK parachuting down at Simpson Airfield, and I would see guys come through our program, and they go from AFF, and every now and again you get that like an AFF superstar that then you blink and he's got 200 jumps, and then you blink again and he's on your camera team, and then but then 3 years later no one even knows his name, Yeah. Like literally like full on burnout, disappeared, gone,
Yep.
And it's just, so there's a personal level of engagement, or, which is like when you feel that burnout going, or you feel you're kind of less interested or more disillusioned, is you have to want to find opportunity.
Sure.
Or that's certainly my experience, and the closest I came, I think, to like walking away from I'd say right about 2017, 2018, loads of like personal life stuff going down, and, stepped away from the drop zone and all that sort of stuff. And I was like, this is the one moment where I could sell my gear and be like, you know what? I had a great ride skydiving. I don't have any like bad memories or anything like that, or bad juju or whatever you want to call it. I just think I've done enough. And it was so funny. I was in that kind of headspace, and I got a phone call from a friend who just said, look, I've got a gig in Texas for a month if you want to come and help out, AFF gig kind of thing. I was like, yeah, do you know what? Maybe this is my swan song, but I'll go out to Texas and I'll do some AFF and see how I feel when I come back, and maybe sell my gear and, just do my one final trip,
Right.
So off I go to the States, go out there, start doing AFF. And it was a great time, great drop zone out in Texas. And I remember I came back home, and I remember sitting on the plane, landing at Heathrow. And in my head, I said this to myself, I'm like, I fucking love skydiving. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, yeah.
It was because I'd had a great time teaching people, doing what I loved, and prior to that, I'd been, deep in the reeds as a drop zone manager for a little bit, and, all the other stuff that's going on. So I was just like, I literally came back, I'm like, I fucking love it. I fucking love skydiving. And it was so funny because I would say within a week, of coming back with that mindset, I got a phone call from Flight One saying, hey, we're hiring.
Isn't that neat how that happens?
It's just like you say, the stars line up sometimes, but I totally believe that you've got to want it to happen. You've got to be like in that right mindset,
Absolutely.
And it was just like an insane ride, and that's kind of how my life goes a lot of the time. But yeah,
I had A similar thing happened when I stepped away from skydiving and flying jumpers. I tried to go see if I could be a real pilot, all that bullshit, for a couple of
Yeah.
years, and I was getting burned out on the real pilot shit just in time to get that random Facebook message from a guy that was flying in Dubai that was like, "Hey, I'm thinking about trying the airlines. What do you think of it?" And I'm like, "I'm thinking about going back to jumping." He's like, "Well, I'm quitting here, so you should apply it." Next thing you know, I live in Dubai and I'm flying over there. And so same thing, the stars just kind of align and you're like, "Well, shit. All right, here we go." So now,
Yeah.
I think if you talk to anyone who's been in the sport any length of time, they'll tell you their journey is like it's very rarely linear, isn't it? And you go through periods of boom and bust, and we all pay a price to take part in skydiving. It's expensive on our finances, on our time, on our families, on everything else. And occasionally you think, is this really is the juice kind of worth the squeeze? And for me, normally all it takes is another jump and I land. I'm like, this is fucking awesome. I'm so lucky to be able to do this in my spare time. And, the privilege of being able to take people on their first, second, third, fourth, fifth skydive, that just keeps me coming back for more. And of course, there will be down times, but I think as has kind of already been said, you just got to kind of look for the next little kind of spark that will kind of spur you on to the next boom and boom before the inevitable bust, and that
sure.
kind of keeps you going back for more.
Well, and whether it be AFF or the tandem stuff, there are people out there that don't remember my name and never will, won't remember what I look like, don't know anything about me, but they will never forget the experience that I gave them. And that's it's an enormous privilege to be given, to know that the thousands of people I've taken on tandems, that every one of them has something that I gave them for the rest of their lives. And that's a really cool thing. So now, how did both of you get started initially? Because you both started jumping in the UK, which we all know is just the perfect place to go learn to be a skydiver.
It is like that, isn't it? It's really funny because when I started back in the, I think it was in black and white actually. No, I just remember seeing this kid from the local uni. I think at the time I went through like the static line stuff, right? So I think at the time I'd maybe just qualified, or maybe I had like 25 or 30 jumps. And at that point you're like sky god material, right, in your own head. So I think I was walking around with my own. I think I owned my own goggles at this point, so I was like, made it.
Yeah.
Not using the DZ rental goggles anymore. I'm the guy, right? So watch out. And anyway, I just remember the kid walking about this like, and I think, and maybe Ollie will have to correct me on this, but I think he like ran the university club or the university skydiving club or section or whatever they would call it. And I never forget. They did this like photo of their whole team, and Ollie's like, I think stood in the middle as like the leader. He's like the main guy in charge and everything. And I remember looking at the photo going, he's not even on freefall.
Oh man, I mean that is totally true. Your recollection is really accurate. I mean, my first jump, I was at university, first year student, in the bar, a few drinks on board. Someone said to me, "Hey, how about we do a parachute jump? There's a university club you can join, go and do a jump." It was pretty cheap. It was subsidized, and I thought that sounded great. Next morning, I kind of thought, "Oh shit, what did I agree to last night?" But of course, I'd agreed to it. I had to do it. I paid the money, turned up, did my static line jump. And then I realized there was a university club. But of course, as is often the case with university clubs, the people that had been involved in running it had graduated and left the year before. So it was kind of dormant. So me and another person off that course revived it. And we kind of started pulling people in to come back and do their first jump. And, as Paul said, like I was like, to them, I was a sky god. I was probably I was on like a 5-second delay. But for me, like watching these people come through and kind of taking them through their first jump and getting them to the DZ and seeing their reaction as they learned and the enjoyment they got from the sport, that really rubbed off on me. And it made me want to go down the instructor route because I saw the impact the static line instructors, who themselves, by the way, only had like 200 jumps at the time. That's all you needed to become a static line instructor in the UK, which was, it seemed like quite a lot at the time because these are the days of like piston aircraft. 2 or 3 jumps a day at the DZ if you were lucky. So that seemed like quite a lot of jumps, but I wanted to be like them. I thought this is just super cool to be able to take somebody off the street, give them ground school, take them up, throw them out on a static line. This was just like awesome. And I knew that was the route I kind of wanted to go down. I knew it'd be a long time to get there. I didn't care how long, but that was kind of just what started me off at that point. I didn't have any interest in competing. I knew I was never going to be like an awesome skydiver, but I knew I could go down the instructor route. And as Paul said, I was like walking around, like thinking, I had my own goggles and my own altimeter then, so like I was really cool. In fact, I've still got the same altimeter. It's an Ultimaster, like an FT50, brilliant bit of kit. Still use it.
Yeah.
And
I think you had a clipboard as well. Did you still have a clipboard?
no, that was yours. That was definitely yours. I think you thought you were in Arizona airspeed just because you'd done a successful 2-way.
Yeah, Ollie, you and I got to talk a bit before the podcast, and Paul, I had told him I became introduced to so many Brits working in the States as a camera flyer and then an instructor. And I went from, a teenager that thought all Brits were, like James Bond, to finding out you guys are all lock, stock, and 2 smoking barrels or some shit like that. And I literally went from not knowing any Brits at all to being able to quote every fucking line from Snatch and thinking that Guy Ritchie's the greatest director ever. And it was funny because there's so many Brits that are actively in skydiving that just would come to the States and take over. And I would always ask them, how'd you end up here? And they're like, have you been to the UK? There's
no true statement.
Yeah, and but it's so funny because there are so many Brits in the sport that come from a place that's not conducive weather-wise to becoming a skydiver.
Yeah, and you know what? It's one of those ones where, like where Ollie and I started up at, in the north of England, like where the weather's terrible, it's coastal, it turns out you can do a fair amount of jumping. It's just like this idea of being northern and coastal, like puts a lot of people off. So, they've struggled there in the past with, that kind of reputation. But I know that Ollie and myself, that, once we kind of got a bit of traction there, it was like, I'm hungry for it. So,
Sure.
I was jumping every flipping week, and so was Ollie, and we were doing all kinds of dumb shit as well, as you probably can imagine. I won't throw us both under the bus, but it's just
You're totally
just
right.
like
I mean,
just
we did a lot of jumps there, but you had to be there a lot. It's a place where the weather is not great. You could jump a lot, but you had to be there a lot. And in a way, it was a fabulous place to learn to skydive because you're learning at a small center with crappy weather. You can only go up from there. And Paul and I started running trips with the Met Police Club out to the US, and places like Elsinore, like Paris, absolutely blew my mind. Because we were going from like a DZ that had a Cessna 182 that took 3 students and an instructor, and that was pretty tight, to like sky vans, otters.
Twin otters.
It was like literally one extreme to the other. It blew my mind. And I feel like in a way it was a kind of privilege to start somewhere so small, because everything on that just built on it. It built on it. It built on it. And we just had such a great time on those trips. They were some of the best times in the sport for me.
Sure. Now, Ollie, we talked.
We worked out pretty early on that if we like Ollie and I were at this point had our AFF ratings, right? So we're kind of like deep into like instructor stuff, and so we obviously had a mutual connection as well through working in the police force in London. So the police at the time, they had a display team, and this is quite an odd, obscure story, but so. I kind of get in contact with the display team leader, manager guy, and I'm like, hey, I see that you've got a team and there's like 3 people and a dog on this team, right? And the budget was quite big for what they were doing and all this stuff. So I kind of thought, you know what? Why don't we just make it like, let's can the display team? Why are the police doing displays? The military do displays because they do like recruit events and all that kind of stuff, but the police, it just doesn't seem to fit to me. So I single-handedly shut the whole display team down, which upset a few people, ruffled a few feathers, and we kind of came up with this concept of like we should be instead of spending money doing displays and training for displays, we should be training new skydivers, right? So Ollie and I kind of went and kind of, we actually stole the model from one of my great mentors. In fact, two guys, Dave Mitchell, John Turner, both ex-police, both ex-military guys. They kind of paved the way so we could stand on their shoulders for this stuff. And they were taking trips away. So I just copied that model. So Ollie and I, we started taking groups away. And I think, I was going through some of the old videos the other day and sending them to Ollie, and like some of our big trips, we were taking like 30 people to Elsinore, like hiring a coach, basically, just taking a busload of Brits to the States.
Oh my God.
Skydiving, and it's like, you can imagine how that went, right? So
I can, because
there's some great.
I worked in fucking in Philadelphia in Cross Keys with a bunch of Brits and an Irishman and a South African, and ask me what it's like as an American to go out on the town on a Saturday night and try and get laid when you're with a bunch of fucking Brits.
You got no chance.
It doesn't happen.
Harry
No.
in town.
Yeah, absolutely. I just had to sit there and keep my mouth shut and have all the girls assume that I was British, because if I opened my mouth, that was it. Nothing was going to happen, because you guys just came and ruined it all.
Yeah, Ollie had a similar experience. It's weird, even with the accent.
You got to play the cards you've been dealt, right?
Oh yeah. So
those trips, though, they kind of we learned a lot on those trips. I think me and Oliver, we had an absolutely stellar time.
Incredible.
Jumping, and the thing is, like, when you take a busload of people to a foreign drop zone, they look upon you as like, oh, these guys are amazing. They're bringing us to the States. They know what they're doing. And we would sit in the bar at the end of the day, me and Ollie, and be like, what the fuck are we doing? It's like just total chaos behind the scenes. But
as it should be.
You literally walk out this is right, and you'd walk out of the like hotel room, pick everyone up to go to the drop zone, do it like almost like, take a breath, let's go, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, I was in perpetual worry someone was going to like come up to us and say, like, we figured out you guys, you don't know what you're doing, we figured you out. But, like, we were running these trips, and like Paul says, this was never about making money, this was never a profit thing, this was just about investing in the club. And as Paul said, like, bringing new people to the sport. And we recruited throughout the Met, and we got people from all different parts of the Met Police, all in very different roles, all different backgrounds, different ages. We were good on the gender mix. We had a lot of girls there as well. And we were inundated with requests to come. Like, literally, it was just like me and Paul. So we were kind of doing these crazy number of jumps. We were exhausted by the end of the day, and it just kept coming, and success fueled success. Like, more and more people wanted to come and do it. And it was just pure fun. And it wasn't just about the skydiving. It was all the other fun stuff that happened as well.
And this was recruiting people to learn how to jump from within the police force.
Yeah.
All right, so Ollie, you and I talked about this a bit before the podcast, but I'd love to hear both your guys' opinions on this. So now it's not just you guys who are in the police force that are mixing with a very interesting blend of people in skydiving, but you're actively bringing other officers that aren't actively in jumping into a pretty gray area world. Did you have to like brief these guys and girls that, hey, a lot of pretty wacky shit goes on at drop zones. We're just here to skydive, or how did that go?
It used to form part of a pre-brief. We used to do like the nutter test. So we used to like meet people, try and meet the people first, like, go out for dinner and say, oh, you want to go skydiving? Come and meet us. Let's go for dinner. Let's go for a drink, whatever, that kind of thing. And that was our first indication of, are they mental? All right, do we actually want to take this person to the foreign land and all that stuff? But then as part of that kind of like pre-briefing is like, what? When you're in the UK and when you're at home, work is work. Drop zones are a very idiosyncratic. Everyone's got stuff going on, right?
Yep.
And it was almost like, let's just be realistic here. If there's major shit going down, then of course, you're never really. I hate saying it. You're never really off duty. You know what I mean?
Sure.
It's very corporate, but it was also the case of, what goes on at drop zones kind of goes on at drop zones.
Well, and Ollie and I said it before, though, it's about mutual respect, right? Because
100% that, 100%
the people that are doing stuff that you guys might raise an eyebrow to on the job just should be kept separate, be respectful. But I have these mental images of the Simon Pegg character from that movie Hot Fuzz. Right, that's by the book and follows every rule and every little infraction's fucked. Obviously, you can't be that way. So, I mean, I guess you guys got to walk into it knowing I'm just going to have to walk the other direction now and then.
Yeah, I mean, a big part of it's about discretion. I'd say, any police officer in the UK, we care about dangerous stuff, and we care about serious stuff that's likely to get people hurt or killed.
Sure.
Like the rest of it, you have to learn to kind of switch off and use a little bit of discretion, because we're there to have fun. Different people have fun in different ways. You can't be on duty all the time. And actually, we never really had a problem with that. I mean, as Paul said, like, we were there to have fun. There was no other purpose to doing those trips other than to have fun, introduce people to sport, and have a great time. So all we were really looking for is people that would be good fun to spend 2 weeks in pretty close contact with, because you're there, you're having breakfast, you then go to DZ, you spend all day in the classroom, you're then jumping in the aircraft together, you're then all evening. You are literally living in each other's pockets for 2 weeks. And, we were pretty selective about who we took, but I can, my recollection is we never had a bad trip. And,
that's amazing.
It brought something very different to it. And each trip was very different. But yeah, it was more like who'd be good fun to spend a couple of weeks with.
Well, and having had conversations a few different times with other members of law enforcement, Hannah Betts, you had mentioned, and the owner of Skydive Shenandoah was a state trooper and all that, and they all say the exact same thing, that there was really no conflict between the two lifestyles. Even, and Ollie, you're still an active officer, yes?
That's right.
Yeah. So I mean, how's that balancing act, by the way? Just because I'm assuming you're working quite a lot, but you say you do a bunch of AFF too. So how is juggling that kind of stuff?
I've never found it difficult, to be honest. I mean, I'm a kind of bigger picture person, I suppose. And, I care about stuff that's going to get someone injured or killed, or somebody else injured or killed. And, I would feel on about, as well as legally bound, to kind of intervene to prevent that happening. But it actually never really arises as a problem, as you say. Is that there's a mutual respect thing around the bonfire, isn't there? And
sure.
It brings together people from all walks of life, and there is a kind of mutual understanding that we all kind of hold different views, we all do different things, but we all share like such a common thread in our lives. I've just never really known it to be a problem, to be honest.
Well, and we're also kind of at the age too. I mean, you had to put your daughter down before you came and hopped on the show, so we're not the same guys we were 29 years ago.
No, we're really not, and I think the older you get, the more cautious you become. I think you start to see stuff happening, don't you? And you see it happen to people who are a lot better than you. And I often think to myself, particularly with the canopy stuff and the swooping stuff, this is biting people who are the best in the business. And if it can bite them, it can really bite me, which is why my risk appetite it was always fairly low, but it's kind of getting lower with time, I guess. I want to live to do this for a long time. It's been a fantastic experience for me and a fantastic ride, and I want to do it into real old age. And one of my skydiving mentors, and Paul and I share many of them, but Doug Peacock in the UK, who was very instrumental to me in becoming an instructor. His FAI license number, by the way, is D68. An idea, like he was a proper pioneer in this. And he's still jumping, he could still instill the fear of God into students like into his 80s. I want to be that guy.
Sure.
And I want to play a long game. I want to be here for a long time and have fun. And I'm not interested in doing anything that's likely to increase my risk of injury or anything else. So I'm a bit of a kind of, I've got a low threshold for risk, I think.
Which is a good segue to Paul, because you got straight into the canopy stuff and kind of going big, so you took a different direction.
I did. Well, again, right, so when I was kind of up at our little northern drop zone, there was two things they used to say about me, right? And that's these are key elements in my trajectory, I think. The first one is they used to say I was an accident waiting to happen, right? Because back then, it was like swooping wasn't really a thing, but it was, right?
Yeah.
It was kind of like really like experienced people did it, and they wouldn't tell you how they did it or what they were doing, but it looked cool. And I was the guy. I was just like, I'm going to try that. you know. I don't know what is it like. Type A personality is like, I'm doing that. It's like just get out of my way while I go and do this shit. And so I was kind of making like radical stuff under canopy, like low turns, and kind of like trying to emulate this stuff that I saw. I was guided well by one of the local guys there who was really experienced, Davey Mitchell. I think at the time he had like 4,000 jumps, which in early 2000s you didn't come across a lot of people like that.
Sure.
You kind of like the kind of big fish. I think our local drop zone underneath that was like 1,000 jumps, and
Sure.
even 1,000. I remember trying to work out how much 1,000 jumps would cost me one day, and I'm like, I'm not going to earn that in my lifetime. I was like 19 years old or whatever, right? But so I was kind of guided well by him. It's like, if you're going to continue doing this stuff, you need to go and speak to the pros about it. So I kind of went off and sought a bit of help. Which really put me in a much safer space, but like coaching didn't really exist. Canopy coaching. I mean,
Sure.
there was very little of that about, back in 99, 2000, around about then, there was the Scott Miller stuff over in the States. And, there was kind of like the PD test jumpers at the time. You could pay them like, what was it, like $50 for a landing debrief,
Right.
half a day, so it was all a bit like ad hoc, but that was the shit I needed, right? So
Sure.
I kind of like went and got a bit of help, but the other thing they used to say about me, which was hilarious, was they used to say I was 3 people short of a 4-way team. Because I was obsessed with 4-way. I still am a secret 4-way nerd, right? Although I don't really do any of it now, but I used to walk around with my full face, my massive super mega booties. I think Tony's suits had just started putting the super sized booties on. And I'd be walking out to the 182, and they'd be like, where's the rest of your team?
The mega booties for a solo jump. You go out there looking like an anime character. Yeah.
I was that guy, right? But they used to say, like, what are you doing on this jump? And I'm like, I'm going up today. I'm doing all of the different slots, for like an E exit, whatever, like pick an exit. I'm going to train all the different slots today on this exit on my own.
So you would do a 4-way jump over 4 skydives, and you'd fly every slot on a different skydive.
Pretty much it. Like when you're talking through now, it sounds absolutely mental, but in your head at the time, it's like, I got to get good at this, and there's no one here to do it. I've got to go and just figure this out.
Yep.
And 4-way is a lot harder to figure out on your own than it is with 3 other people.
Yeah. Well, and it's changed a lot, right? Because back in the late 90s, there wasn't that much direction for somebody that just got into the sport, especially at a smaller drop zone. Because I started at a smaller drop zone as well. And as soon as you were off student status, it was kind of a have fun, let us know what you figure out.
Yeah.
And so you kind of had to do that. I would get together with the random buddy that would show up at the drop zone, and what do you want to do on the exit? You hold here and I'll hold there, and we'll roll out this way and see what happens. And you just kind of fucking learned what was going to go on. But now, because there are so many different variations to skydiving and so many different ways that you can get proper coaching, I feel like students these days have a lot more direction than we did back then.
There's a lot more direction, a lot more direction, a lot more structure, I would say. And I agree with Paul. There was very little in the way of canopy training then. There was very little in the way of formation skydiving training. And back then, you picked somebody who looked like they knew what they were doing, and they themselves probably only had 150 jumps. They had the mega booties, they had the full face helmet, and you'd go and you'd try and fly some slots, and the exit would probably funnel, and you probably wouldn't see each other very much during the skydive. But like, you just kind of went along and kind of figured it out, and eventually you got better at it, didn't you? And you were able to fly a slot, and you were able to stay in proximity, and all the other good things. Whereas I feel now, like with the sport has become more professionalized, and there's much better training to working towards your formation skydiving skills. but it's also become more commercialized, I think, is the kind of downside of that. And like,
Sure.
people have to like invest in these kind of ratings and these certifications in a way they didn't really have to before. So it's kind of come at a cost. I think undoubtedly people's flying skills are much better and they improve much more quickly. And it's a much clearer path to becoming good at canopy or free fly or belly flying or whatever discipline you go down. But it's definitely come at a bit of a cost to the culture, I think.
Sure. Oh, no, inarguably, it absolutely has. But at least in regard to the canopy side of things, coming from the toggle whipping stiletto generation, it's nothing but good. Because I mean, I'm sure, Paul, you know better than most just how fucking sketchy learning canopies back then was, and it really was hey, here's this incredible wing, go figure it out type of thing. And that's the one thing that's definitely changed for the better. And you would know again more than most flying with Flight One.
You know what? It's that thing of back in the day, there was no training really. It was all like the discovery method, you know. And you know, I got you know, it's just hitting hope on it, you know. So I just vividly remember though that when I was kind of like in that early, I think I was toggle whipping a flipping Sabre 170. You know, it's pretty, you know what I mean? It was horrendous, man. But I never forget, right? I was schooled early on because one of my instructors at the time, a guy called Steve Burns, he just got, I think it was a Velocity when the Velocity first came out, which is like early 2000s.
Yep.
And I think it might have even been like the first one in the UK. It was one of those like this guy had 1,000 jumps or just over, got this velo. It was a velo 120, the biggest one they made, all that kind of stuff. And I'll never forget his first jump on it. I was there at the drop zone. I was kind of like in the car park, quite, you know, young and impressionable, watching this guy. And he made a terrible mistake and he really hurt himself. And I mean, he didn't die, but he made himself a quadriplegic,
Oy.
you know. And that was my first kind of incarnation into like, this shit's fucking dangerous.
Yep.
This is dangerous shit, man. This is like every jump. Like, because you know when you're training, when you're on, like going through your early jumps and stuff, you know it's scary, dangerous, because in your head you think every jump's your last jump. I'm going to die today. Fuck, you know, pushing myself, you know. But you do kind of get through that, don't you? And it kind of becomes enjoyable and all that stuff. So, but then when you see, like Ollie was saying, like a really experienced person to me at the time, absolutely mangle himself. You know, he'd literally destroyed himself, man. Cartwheel through that canopy, you know, and sadly Steve died just last year. So he lasted, you know, nearly 30 years in a wheelchair on a ventilator. You know, terribly sad story. But I wanted to mention that because I remember in, you know, a couple of years later, there I am in Z Hills on a 4-way training camp with actual 4-way team, not just 3 mystery pretend people. And we were really lucky. We'd been supported by Derek Thomas, who was at Sunpath at the time. His son Carl was on our team, so we picked up a bit of a deal for those guys. And I remember I picked up my rig, and it was a Velocity 96 that I'd ordered, you know. And I was pretty experienced, you know, and I considered myself kind of ready and all that stuff. But it was just, for me, it was like it was a stigma. It was like a virtual hurdle I had to get over. Like the at the time, it seemed like, fuck, this is big, you know. And I had jumped at the time. I jumped loads of different size canopies and much smaller than that and much bigger, all that stuff. But it's just the fact that there was a Velocity and know what happened to Steve. I'm like, okay, my first jump, I'm just going to do what I know and just fly this sucker down and land it and just take a breath, you know. But then it was just that classic skydiving scenario. So the hop and pop that I planned, you know, couldn't go ahead. My team had just turned up. So they all turned up early and we had a coach at the time. And I think filming us was Tony Hathaway was filming us. So we paid quite a bit of money for Tony. So it was like, no hop and pop, man. You're going straight to 10.5 and you've got 4 jumps and then a 20-minute break. I'm like, fuck. So I went up and I'll never forget this, man. Never forget it. I was up there. I opened this velo. It opened like shit, as they used to. And I'm like, the spot is miles away from where we intended to get out. We were the only team getting out, so we had to kind of the sky to ourselves. And in my head, I had all these drills I wanted to go through on this hop and pop, like sweet spot and flares and rises and stuff. And now I don't have that luxury. I've only just opened. It's like 2,800 feet. And we're miles away from where I'm supposed to be, and I'm on the next load. So, and I'm just in my head, I'm thinking of Stevie Burns, thinking, I know I can do this, but I gotta be fucking on it today. And honestly, my senses were like 110%. I was wide, I was switched on, and I literally just flew the basic student pattern down, cross, into wind, no heroics. And I landed that canopy, and I literally smiled to myself. I remember smiling, going, this canopy is amazing. And it was just the most basic flight, but it was just that like level of respect that I think I'd learned that respect from the experiences over the years of being a bit of a wild card, and then seeing the shit with Steve. And then like Ollie says, like when you see someone more experienced getting bitten by the sport, it just spikes the senses, right? Spikes it, and I use that story a fair amount actually when I'm teaching canopy stuff, because it's a real world experience. And a lot of the time I get people in the classroom who are they're just there, open, ready to learn, basic stuff. And they just want to get, better at landing or better at, pattern work or whatever. Then you do get some of our other courses where you get like the hot shots in there, and it's like, I know these guys are good. I know they're good, but they also need like, almost like the arm around reality check, which is, let's just spool back a bit. Let's pedal backwards and let's go to some of the basics, And it's so funny because you do see people that are just like, oh man, all this money for this, and they're taking me back. And it's like, by the time you get to the end of the day, it's like the flight stuff's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle. You kind of like reverse out, put the pieces in the right place, and then they get to the end of the day and they're like, holy shit, this is so much different.
Yeah. You got to kind of, you got to Mr. Miyagi them.
A little bit, a little bit of that, definitely. And you see that with the hotshot types that they just need, real world experience. Like my mate was quadriplegic all of his life because of this sport. And then there's loads of other examples where some people haven't been so lucky, and you see those. The longer you're in the sport, you see your friends die, right, or people and all that kind of stuff. So using those real world examples to like pull someone back and put them on a better trajectory, it's like that's my juice, man. I get paid to do this, but man, that's my juice. It
can be really difficult to the hotshot guys they've got that goal in mind and they know exactly where they want to go, and to try and teach them that they should be playing the long game. Like, you got a lot of years in this sport and you got a lot of time that you're going to be able to spend under canopy. So don't be in a rush to get there over the next 20 jumps. It's not going to do.
Yeah.
And I was lucky. I had one of the hotshot instructors at the drop zone that I learned frapped himself in and on an old Batwing. You would remember those canopies. And toggle whipped himself in on his very first jump on that canopy, and he lived and ended up getting back into the sport and everything. But that happened so young in my sport that I only downsized out of necessity as a camera guy trying to keep up with the tandems that I was filming, so I took it very slow because I learned from his lesson. And I mean, let's face it, skydiving's a sport where you want to learn from other people's mistakes if you can.
You have to. Yeah. Paul will remember this. This is a very tragic reminder, but kind of so important to keep front of mind. Paul and I were doing a drop zone orientation on morning one, day one of the ground school at Paris many years ago, and unfortunately, a canopy collision, which resulted in a fatality, happened right in front of us. I still find that kind of a little bit difficult to talk about, but that happened right in front of the students. And it was just kind of a great reminder of, the sport that can kind of give you so much can also kind of take so much. And, I think you forget that at your peril. We have to kind of balance those two things of the upside and, the potential downside. And I think that's something as like instructors, we kind of owe it to our students to do.
Well, those aren't lessons that you can forget for very long. I mean, you can put them to the back of your mind, but I mean, you spend as much time as the three of us have in the sport, and I have a whole lot of phone numbers in my phone that don't call people anymore, and
Yeah.
it just keeps coming. And I had somebody ask me, well, how come you stay in the sport? You've lost so many, friends and acquaintances to the sport. And I'm like, I'm so deep in this sport now. If I never went on another drop zone, never saw another canopy again, I'm still going to lose friends to skydiving. The idea is to try and lose as few as possible. And that's through stuff like Flight One training and AFF, with both you guys are doing. And it's that kind of experience that you bring to it that keeps the risk as low as possible. I mean, it's also incredibly rewarding, right? When you're able to teach someone the right way.
Yeah, and I think it brings a lot to people's
I think the
lives as well.
reward.
Oh, go on, sorry, Paul.
Yeah, go on. I think the reward is certainly, seeing like those light bulb moments in people. It's like, because sometimes, like I say, working with the lower experience, that like guys straight off AFF, they come into like our 101 classroom and 102 stuff. And for them, they've heard some of the stuff that you're talking about, like flat turns and all that stuff. They've heard some of that, and they've maybe had, some level of input on it, like in the bar or in the pack-in shed or whatever. So when they come into the classroom and like you can fully break it down and re-explain it, in a classroom setting is useful as well, because you can go back and forth with people, and go through that whole kind of theory exercise. The light bulb moment though comes when they go up and then do like the jump exercise, and then they come back and they go, "Hey Paul, guess what?" And it's just like, gotcha.
Yeah.
It's and I'm like, I've got you in that learning mode. That's the flipping juice, man. And that, for everyone in Flight One, and I'm not going to hard sell Flight One. That's not really this was about. But when you get that level of like ping out of people, I think everybody in Flight One thrives on it.
Yeah,
and that's why they work at Flight One.
Every good instructor. I mean, Ollie and I talked before the podcast, and he said how incredibly rewarding AFF is to him. For me, it was being a tandem instructor that got to share that kind of thing. And it's just, you cannot express to people how fucking cool it is to see that moment on another person and go, fuck, I did that.
Yeah, and those problematic students as well. And like Paul and I know many of them where were students that just you had to admire their resolve. They were really struggling, but they kept on coming back. And like we've had students where like all the instructors would be in the office in the morning, kind of hanging out, chilling out, and then a certain student would turn up, and like gradually the instructors just start to kind of back away to the door, and like they start to disappear. And all of a sudden you realize like you're the only instructor stood there, and you're like, oh my God. And before you know it, you're looking at the manifest and you're like, I'm with this person. And this person's like done maybe 5 repeats of the level, and you kind of think, right, I'm going to be the guy that helps them crack this, and occasionally you are, and then you let them go, and they just fly beautifully, and they've cracked it. And as Paul said, like you can see the light bulb moment has happened, and all of a sudden, all the concerns, all the fears have kind of gone out the window, and they're just flying great in front of you. It doesn't always happen like that, of course, we all know that. But when it does happen, that's great. And I take a moment like that every 10 jumps, no problem.
Oh yeah. Well, and the other really cool thing too is, especially with a problem student like that, is that sometimes you have to get really creative in the way that you approach whatever problem it may be. So it's always something new. All right, how do I get through to this person? How do I get this point across? Because everything else is not working. And it's a super rewarding moment when you're like, not only did this student get it and I get to feed off of their energy, but I also did something I wasn't sure I could do. So it's just double whammy. It's got to be the same for the canopy stuff too.
Oh, totally. I think we all, probably agree that we kind of feed off it, don't we? That great moment. And in fact, you know what? Touching on a slightly, broader version of that is, there's something really cool, right, when you're doing AFF, and maybe Ollie will back this up as well, but when you kind of like, when you exit the AFF like double level and I like to high five the other instructor. We all do that, I'm sure, but there's some instructors out there who go, "Don't high five me." Woohoo, we did an exit. I'm like, flipping it, mate. It's time to take up something else. I love getting out there and doing that high five. But the key point I was going to make though is when you do that high five or the fist bump over the back of your student, and what you're looking at is your secondary instructor or the other instructor, and it used to be one of your students. You're just like, well, there's two parts to that, right? One is how did I get so old, right? And secondly, like, how flippin' cool is this?
Yes.
You've been like instrumental in that guy's journey, and they've struggled or whatever, and then you blink, and then they're on the other side, reserve side AFF. You're just thinking, shit, man, this is cool.
It's such a big part of it, isn't it? Like the teamwork that you have to, especially for the double levels, with the other instructor and the kind of the non-verbal communication with secondary, across the top. You kind of learn, especially if you do AFF with the same people a lot, you do develop like a kind of almost sixth sense around what the other person's thinking around. Are we going to let go? Okay, you back off, I'll stay there, And I think that's a big part of it for me is like the teamwork. It's the only sport I know where the instructor-student ratio is more 2-to-1. I don't know of any other sport that has more instructors than students. And I think that's a really cool part of it for me is the teamwork with the rest of the instructor pool as well.
And it's amazing how much information can be passed through a glance.
Yeah.
It really is.
Oh, yeah.
Like just a momentary eye contact and you get volumes of information from the other side of that student and you know exactly what's coming. And it's an amazing thing. It's that that shorthand that you get between instructors that just is difficult to describe.
I think that's why as well that, when we used to do, our trips away and whatnot, obviously I would never say this to Ollie's face, but I used to love jumping with Ollie, because like he's a top guy, friendly bloke, smiley face, but there was also there's that connection level, of like, we kind of know what's going on here, so it's just like there's a comfort level there, right? So
sure,
those trips were always enjoyable, even with really problematic students. It was always enjoyable, because Ollie was there, usually laughing at me struggling with someone while he's let go. Let me figure it out, or then I figure it out and then deliberately we turn the student away and then leave Ollie like in the shadow, all those little things,
There's so many funny moments. I mean, Paul will remember the story. We took a very close friend of mine, like a childhood friend of mine, amongst a group of others to Elsinore to learn to skydive, and he's a top guy, real bright guy, but kind of overthought everything, and kind of he struggled quite a lot with some of the skydiving stuff, and we tried very hard to kind of get in his head and to help him progress and everything else, and we took him on this particular one I remember, and I think Paul will remember this one, and he's exercising his mental demons, he's psyching himself up, this is a big jump for him. And on that aircraft, and this is something that would only ever happen in skydiving, there's two girls doing their first naked skydive. So like they're getting kind of geared up for their exit, and there's kind of all high fives, and like everyone kind of doesn't really know where to look because free fall and like open door aircraft are flattering to nobody naked. Yep. And on one hand, you got like these crazy people do this naked skydiving, and like you got this other guy just wrestling with his demons, and it's all on one airplane, and it's just you would only ever find that in something like skydiving.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh man, but that's the coolest thing about it, right? Is it offers so much variety all in one plane.
It's that little metal tube. Once you're all in that tube,
and you cannot explain to people that aren't in the sport and don't jump what it's like. It's very difficult to describe what goes on. But it's so much fun.
That was funny because that was part of like not so much the sales pitch, but when we were kind of like organizing these trips, most of the people that sign up to AFF with us was like they just want the t-shirt that said I jumped out of a perfectly good airplane,
right?
Or they're like, oh, I got a license, I'm licensed to skydive, all that stuff. But then trying to explain this side of it to them, like, oh, you know what? On the last trip, there was these two naked girls, and it just so happens that they sat in the boot of the caravan, facing for. It's like there's no place to look.
Yeah.
But trying to explain all of that stuff, it's just like, it's just so funny. Like, do you know what? That would put some people off.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. I was flying for
you gotta like ease people in, you know.
I was flying for Doug Smith out at CSC in the PAC 750, and this girl comes out and she wants to observe, and I think she probably did 3 or 4 observation rides. And the way that he had the pack set up, he had the co-pilot seat turned around backwards so that they could use it for jumpers.
Yeah.
So she's sitting backwards facing the door, and she does a bunch of rides, and then she gets out of the plane. And the next thing I know, we're shutting down, and she wants to keep riding, but they're like, you can't keep giving her free rides. So I jokingly said, if you get on the plane naked, it's free. So she strips down, wearing nothing but a bailout rig, and she's sitting in the co-pilot seat in the pack, and it's the only load ever on any pack ever where everybody sat facing the front of the fucking plane. Doing crunches the entire time because they wanted to look at the cute naked girl sitting in the co-pilot seat.
God.
How do you explain? You can't explain that to the real world. Yeah, so yeah, like I'm kind of a pilot.
So many fun
Yeah.
moments, man. I mean, we all remember this trip as well. We ran one trip out to Elsinore in June, and we got hit with the California June gloom. And all credit to Yong Chisholm. She said, right, this isn't going to change for the 2 weeks. Let's head out to Taft. And we got on the road, we packed everything up, and we drove out to this crazy drop zone called Taft, which I'm sure a lot of your listeners will know. And we just had the best time there. They just took great care of us. One of the lifts stuck in my mind. We got out, the spot was a bit deep. I realized pretty quickly I was not going to get back. So I'm looking for out landings, and I see this perfect place. It's like big square area, no hazards that I can see. There's nothing overhanging it, no aerial hazards. I'm kind of setting up for it. And then I look down, and I see a load of people playing basketball. And I'm looking down, and I'm like, this is weird. They're all wearing the same thing. And then I kind of look around, and I'm like, why has this basketball court got such a massive perimeter fence around it?
Oh no.
And then I'm like, oh fuck, I'm on finals to land in a prison. So I did a massive panic. I just managed to land outside it, but I came very close to landing in a prison in California, and I just don't know how that one ended up.
Oh, it wouldn't have ended well.
Not for me.
It would.
I remember. I literally remember that jump, and I remember looking down, and it's one of those days where it's like I think we were last out the plane, whatever we were doing. I can't quite remember, but I remember looking down, going, "Oh, a long way away." So I tracked off at about $8,000. And Paul's, I think I don't know. I pulled it maybe 5,000 or 6,000, right? And I kind of made my way back to the drop zone, landed on, and I'm looking at these canopies all these miles away. I'm going, where the fuck are they going? What's going on? Anyway, so when Ollie comes back in, he's like, dude, that was a close one. I'm like, really? Like, what happened? Like, low turn? Because no, he landed in a freaking prison. I'm like, oh,
I promise you that's the one place in the United States where your English accent would not have helped. Would have made it a lot fucking worse. Now, we're getting down towards the end of the hour, but there's a couple things I want to ask. First off, Paul, I see, what is that, a Suzuki Cafe bike in the background and like a dozen guitars hanging on the wall. That looks like the most awesome fucking man cave. What?
It's pretty big, eh?
Yeah, well, and I hope you play guitar and ride the bike.
I do. So yeah, I play guitar all my life. I play in a skydiving band called Winging It, and we go around the UK on tour, playing at like DZ Boogies and playing at like big events, big like the association event and things like that. But I mean, I don't know how much that you will see, but I think there's like 30 guitars.
You're a proper collector
around in here, and I got a lot of stuff. Or as my mom says, I got a lot of shit missing in my life.
So you're a proper collector of guitars.
I got a few, yeah. I got quite a few bits and pieces there. But my bike, I've got one of my bikes in my studio here as well. My other bike has just been race prepped by a skydiver, actually. Again, so the skydiving network is full of old, colourful bits and bobs, and like great guy Tony's been sorting my other bike out. But I do have another bike story, which is an absolute belter. So Ollie rides bikes as well. So I love my sports bikes. I've got my GSXR bikes over there, but because we're both really old, we bought like big grandpa bikes, these great big BMW like adventure bikes. And it's so funny because we decided that we'd buy these adventure bikes and we'll go ride around the west coast of Africa, places like that, and like just go bike touring. This is a great idea. So in the first year, I think I went to the local store 3 times and did my shopping. And I've been to have it serviced twice, and that's it.
But the funny part is though, and I'll do the short version because I could do all night on this. So when we bought the bikes, we ordered them together, and it was like we're going to buy the same bike, same color scheme, all this stuff because we're going on tour, right? So we bought the bike, tick all the options in the sheet. So when you get the bike, it's got literally all the bells and whistles, right? Anyway, so when my bike comes, somehow or other, I'd missed off ticking the option for a heated seat, right? And a heated seat on a motorbike is the most useless flipping thing in the world, but it was an option and I missed it. Anyway, when the bikes turn up, Ollie's got a heated seat and I don't. So this caused great upset for the next 12 months, maybe longer, to the point where I got so sick of him telling me how warm he is on these rides that I went and ordered a brand new bike, exactly the same. And I ticked every single option and I made sure, and I said to the guy at the dealership, like, this better have a fucking heated seat. Because this is just like it's been doing me in for like nearly a year. Anyway, so the new bike arrives, and I won't say, but it cost me thousands to change this bike. Right? Turns up, and I'm like, yeah, got my heated seat, everything's good. Anyway, that particular bike has been one of those like problematic purchases or problematic bikes where everything's gone wrong with it. To the point where I had to reject it back to the dealership and say it's not fit for purpose. So this heated seat has now cost me, I think it's $8,000 to change bikes. It's now cost me the same again in legal work. But I'm finally at the end of it, and I get my new bike on Saturday. So in 2 days' time, my new bike turns up with a heated seat, and I'm done.
Couldn't you just put a heated seat on the first bike?
Oh, man. Wouldn't you think that would be easy?
That's
Why
the first
didn't I think of that?
That's the first thing that popped into my mind anyway.
Oh, my God.
So, hey, as we wrap things up, I want both of you guys to tell us how they get a hold of you if they want to come do AFF, if they want to do canopy courses and all that stuff. So both of you guys give me social media and contact information.
Okay, I thought Ollie was going to go. No worries. So obviously I work at Flight One, so you'll catch me at flight-one.com. That's our main website. You'll not just get me there, but you'll get all of our, Flight One family there. 40 plus instructors all around the world, but you'll find me on there, and I do courses all around the UK. Although I am based at a drop zone called Sky High, which is in the northeast of the UK. I'm there a lot of the time. I'm the chief instructor there, so you can come up there and catch me on the fly. It's one of our new Flight One campuses, basically. So you got dedicated instructor there all the time, and I can guide you through any of the products or anything that you need. If you wanted to get me on socials, then it's just Paul Dorward on Facebook, Paul Dorward on Instagram, and as of yesterday, I have a LinkedIn. So, it's funny because actually just prior to this, I had a meeting with our social media company that worked with us at Flight One called The Edge, and I'm notorious for being like the worst social media guy in the history of social media. So they're helping me out, making me look good on social media. But yeah, Flight One website, you'll catch me there.
Holly and Anna will take good care of you over there for sure. Now, how about you, Ollie?
So currently teaching two drop zones. So Skydive Simpson in the Midlands, and also Skydive Headcorn, working with Fleur, who I think you've had on your podcast as well. So
I have indeed.
Down there. So working those two DZs. I live in London, so those are pretty easy journeys for me. Periodically in the wind tunnel as well in iFly in London, and all the usual socials. Ollie Neuberger on Instagram or Oliver Neuberger on Facebook. So I'll be there.
Perfect. Gentlemen, this has been fucking great. And I have a feeling we'll need to do a round 2 because I don't think I scratched the surface on stories that you guys have got to tell or shit to talk about each other.
100% right.
This has been very PG. I thought it might get a bit more
It's
X-rated.
been very tasteful. It's a tasteful intro, but yeah, we could go deep on this.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of funny because my introduction to the culture of true Brits is having to come to terms with the fact that really good friends are fucking horrible to each other.
100%.
Just horrible.
That is literally Ollie and I, definitely.
Oh yeah, which is why I have so few friends outside of skydiving, because I've just turned into this enormous prick. When I care about people, I say every horrible thing I can, and it's because of guys like you. So thank you.
When you're in that environment a lot in skydiving, then you go to like a professional environment in the day, you have to kind of catch yourself sometimes and say, I can't joke in that way. I can't like say that we're saying, well, we're done at the drop zone,
Oh yeah, man. I worked security at the Venetian Hotel in Las Vegas when they did the red carpet event for the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And I'm standing next to another guy doing security, and Sean Connery's walking down the red carpet, and he goes, he looks really good for his age. And my response was, yeah, I'd fuck him. Wrong job. Skydivers would have loved it. That guy didn't think it was nearly as funny as I did. So no. But guys, hey, thank you so much.
Ollie and I could do a great Vegas story, but we'll save that for round 2.
What, you're gonna have to, because I spent a lot of time there, so I'm sure I'd enjoy that one myself. But guys, thank you so much, man.
Dean, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thanks for giving us the time to have a good laugh with you guys.
Take care. Well, there you have it. Another episode of the Lunatic Fringe podcast, brought to you as always by, well, wait, not as always, actually. Brought to you now by Gyro. Formerly known as NZ Aerosports, you'll head to gyro.com for their next level line of canopies. By Pussfoot, the Extreme Sports Collective. Head over to pussfoot.com to check it out. By Summit Parachute Systems, check out summitparachutesystems.com to talk to Jarrett Martin and the gang about kick-ass pilot rigs, rigging courses, and more. By Flyaway Indoor Skydiving, go to flyawaytn.com and check out all the cutting-edge stuff to come. By Pure Spectrum CBD, head to purespectrumcbd.com to check out their wide range of CBD products. And as for us, head to the lunaticfringepodcast.com to listen to any of the hundreds of episodes currently available, hit the link for our YouTube channel, pick up your copy of the Lunatic Fringe book or The Accidental Stripper, and get a sneak peek at upcoming guests. Once again, thanks for listening. We'll see you next time.
Bye.